Welcome everyone to All In on Real Estate. I'm your host, Aaron Goins. I started this meetup because when I was in the military, no one in my circle talked about real estate. A lot of times they talk about debt, they talk about other finances, but nothing about real estate. And I want to start a meetup where people can learn about the benefits and build generational wealth through real estate. So I'm very, very excited for my guest speaker today, Miss Lisa Hylton. How you doing, Lisa?
I am doing good. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I've always been a big fan of Lisa ever since I met her. And I can't wait to dig in about your podcast, about your career, and what's next for you. So let's start
Sure.
off. Let me ask my first question. I always ask, how did you get started in real estate?
Yeah, so I got started in real estate through my family. So my father was a contractor. He built 14 apartment units when I was a child. So as a child, I was helping to collect rent, helping to clean apartments when they went empty, selling quarters because we had a laundromat. And if there's any issues, helping my parents like call maintenance people, or my father would come fix different stuff that was going on. So that was my initial taste. But from that initial taste, I wasn't like, my parents weren't big on like, oh, invest in real estate. They were more like get a good education, go to school, that kind of stuff. So I didn't actually bought my first property until I was in my early 20s. And I was living in Grand Cayman, and I bought a 2 bedroom, 2.5 bath townhouse in Grand Cayman. Held on to that for about 6 years. Bought it too, I paid too much money for it because it cash flowed. It broke even the first year and lost money every single year after that for a total of 5 to 6 years. And the breaking point was I got a email for a bill that was over $1,000, and AC had broken down. The tenant called the AC company. They came out, fixed the AC, sent me a bill for over $1,000. And I was like, oh my goodness, this property is making no money and comes with so many now additional expenses to the tune of over $1,000. So they said, okay, it's time for this to go. I'm getting ready to sell it. So it took about 6 months to a year to sell, but eventually it sold. And I was like, no more real estate. I am done. And I say the universe has a sense of humor because a year or so later after I said that is when I took a job working as a controller in private equity real estate funds at an investment manager in the Los Angeles area. And during that time, first 6 months, it's like I got to understand the business. And the second 6 months, I was like, oh, wow, like people are making money investing in real estate. And my early experiences were not indicative of like everyone's experience. And it was through that I started getting educated about investing in real estate, and my journey began. So yeah, that's how I got started.
Oh man, that's wonderful right there. That's wonderful right there. So moving forward into your real estate journey, what was some of your earliest biggest takeaways from real estate when you first got into it?
Yeah, I think when I first got into it was buying for cash flow. So like better understanding the numbers on your properties. Because when I think about that first purchase, like I don't think I fully understood, running the numbers on that particular property. And that obviously got me in trouble later on because after I now bought the property and the rents, like understanding what the property could rent for, and then being able to look at what my expenses, my mortgage, and like those kinds of things. The second thing was the place I bought had an HOA or strata, so homeowners association, and that I did not control. So it was at the mercy of the strata, which negotiated a higher fee about a year after I purchased the property. So now the owners of the property were putting more money into the strata because they wanted to have reserves and better insurance and all these other things that they wanted to do for the property, which was great. It's just that it further eroded the cash flow coming off of that property. So I feel like those were the two things that I would say, looking back, I learned from that experience. But I also think that, sometimes you just have to get out there and try things. And from that experience, from the experience of trying, you then start to realize what you like and what you don't like to do. And then that gives you more clarity in terms of the path you want to take going forward. So, yeah.
I think that's some good points right there. Some great points because you have more focus on what you want to get into, and what you don't want to get into, right, as you go along. Um,
Correct.
so, moving forward, just a little bit up your career. What is it was anything that you had a pivot with that you decide, okay, I'm gonna go this route more than this route? Was it anything in real estate that you said, man, I really have a passion for, or was it just destiny that made you get into what you get into?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. So I've had a lot of pivots, a lot of pivots. Um, when I took the job and then realized that real estate was a lucrative investment, when I got to LA and was now working as a controller. I started off with the path of turnkeys. So I was looking to buy single family homes. And for about a year, I was looking in like the Southeast markets. And given my earlier experience, I was very weary of like understanding the numbers more than anything else because of my initial experience that didn't go very well. And it was through that, I couldn't really pull the trigger. I was looking at Detroit, looking at Alabama, looking at different states, but ultimately didn't pull the trigger on them. And I was taking a break after like a year of looking and just not convinced of what I was seeing. I took some time off. I took a year off, and it was during that year I met someone who was a syndicator. And they like I wasn't looking for them. I was doing this personal development program, and they just so happened that they were in that program as well, and that's how we started talking. And I didn't even know that they syndicated until we exchanged numbers. And one day after, like I was on a staycation here in LA, and I just so happened I ran across her card in my bag, and I said, you know what, I was supposed to call this lady to learn more about the whole real estate stuff that she does. Let me call her and find out. And it was when I called her, I realized, oh, like what she did. And I realized, wow, like what she did was it was like where I worked, but only thing for everyday people. Whereas where I was working was for institutional investors and, very large projects and stuff like that. And I was like blown away, and I was like, wow, like this is very interesting. This is different from like, I just didn't think it was possible. And it was from that experience that I then made my first investment into a syndication. So that meeting her was the first pivot, because meeting her pivoted me from single family into commercial real estate.
Mm.
And then after I was now in commercial real estate investing, by the end of that year, I had invested in two syndications, both of them multifamily, both of them have now sold. So that was 2019. And the second one, I had an opportunity to do my first special purpose vehicle. That was the first time that I raised capital for a deal. And what that looked like, it was an opportunity to create an entity, and the goal of that entity was to take the money raised and invest it into the deal that I had already chosen to also invest in as well. This is all before the deal finally closed. It was myself and about four other ladies. We raised a total of $500,000, and then invested into the deal. My actual raise myself was 50K. And then I put 25 of my own money into my entity as well, alongside my investors. So that was my very first raise, and that's what that looked like. And it was from that I realized, oh, I think syndication is what I wanted to do. And I didn't know what role I wanted to play. As a matter of fact, I didn't even think about syndication in the perspective of roles. I just saw it as doing everything at that point in time. And yeah, I did a couple more programs that helped me to then sort of learn more about like underwriting and looking at the markets, acquisitions, and all of that stuff. And after I did that and then started to build, I launched my podcast in February of 2020. And once I did that, it was like I still wasn't like fully clear that syndication, like what I was really building. So it was continuing to, go through the processes And I want to say sometime in late 2020 into 20, I want to say maybe sometime into, yeah, late 2020 is when I realized that I needed to focus on a role, like one of the roles in syndication: acquisitions, underwriting, asset management, investor relations slash capital raising. And sometimes underwriting just falls under acquisitions, but as you grow, that sometimes is a different group altogether that supports your acquisitions team. So that's towards the end of 2020 is when my second pivot came, because that's when I started to get clear that, oh, I actually wanted to play primarily in the capital raising space. And into 2021 is when I hired my next coaching program that was more focused on actually the capital raise, whereas everything before was more about like the holistic approach of like syndication in general. And from that, I then was able to sort of build out my back end systems, like my active campaign, my brand, and that kind of stuff. That started to take shape and start to take form. And then I want to say around April-ish is when I decided to leave my job. And shortly after I decided to leave my job, about a couple months later is when I started to realize was when my next pivot came, which is more pivoting into like funds, like being a fund manager. And that pivot has sort of I've ridden that pivot, and that's where I'm at now. And more pivots. I have co-GP'd on a deal in the fall of 2021. And that co-GP opportunity enabled me to get experience. That was my first co-GP opportunity. So that gave me experience being on the general partner team and more experience asset management. So that deal is a multifamily Class A. We purchased it from the developer that just finished developing it and leasing it up. And it's in Bradenton, Florida, so right out of Sarasota. And that one is about close to 300 units. And a part of the asset management calls that happen like every week, we have asset management calls going through what's going on the property and staying abreast onto everything that's going on there. So it's definitely been one hell of a journey. And in full transparency, Aaron knows this, I decided to take a job. So after much, what ended up happening is I took a step back and I realized that as I was meeting syndicators were like, oh, you have fund experience. Maybe you can help me like in my fund, or maybe we can talk about this, that, and whatever. And I realized that like I could do that, but like I also wasn't going to make enough to keep the lights on and the rent on. And one of the things I learned about syndication, which is different from like joint ventures, is that syndication, a lot of it is riding on the back end. A lot of the payday isn't at the front. Like there's some in the acquisition fee, to the extent that you have designed your deal with an acquisition fee, there's some there. But a lot of that acquisition fee is seeking to recoup you from the expenses that it took for you to get the deal. So like your legal and, all that travel that you have done and whatever, like marketing for investors and all of that stuff, right? And then your asset management fee along the way is just helping you to keep the lights on, right? It's not like getting you rich or anything. It's when you sell the deal and perform, not just sell the deal and not perform, but sell the deal and actually hit your appreciation goals and surpass them. That's when the investors win and you win as well. And for that might look like 3 years from now, that might look like 5 years from now. So what do you do in the meantime? And that's where people might have their own portfolio of properties, or they might joint venture with other people. So it doesn't mean that syndication isn't a good business. It just means that it's a longer game. and you need to be in a position to be playing that longer game. And if you are syndicating deals that are ground up ground up development deals, you're definitely playing long game even more than someone who is doing a syndication on value add or new develop, property, like buying a class A. So those are some things that when you are just starting, you don't always know. And because people don't always talk about that in the business. But like as you get into the business and you start having conversations and learning about the different deals, you begin to realize like how the cake, so to speak, is made. And then that helps you to sort of say, okay, like how do I then leverage myself accordingly? So I said, if I'm going to work, why not work for um, an investment manager where I could potentially have equity, a salary, and continue to develop my skills and my um, expertise while also still building my business. And what that requires is building a team where you go to work and building a team in your business that helps you to continue to have your social media running, to continue to have, you know, landing pages, your lead magnets, your ebooks, and all that stuff to continue to attract investors. And, continue to like even perhaps having people like that, you hire that could help you to even do a second pair of eyes on on the underwriting of the deals that are presented to you. Someone that is on your team that you're paying, that you trust, that is going to take a look at them. So that way you're able to continue to grow, but you're not just taking on deals that you don't believe in to invest in. You're taking on deals that you've taken the time to look at. And I guess the last thing I'll say to this is, when I got started, I took the approach of like, since I was in, I don't want to say capital raising, but more investor relations and creating funds and that kind of stuff. So more on the money side of the syndication business, that I felt that to some extent, I didn't really need to specialize in a market. But as time and asset class, but as time has gone on, I have found for my personality and for my ability to sleep at night, I prefer now to actually pick a market or two that I dedicate the time to get to know deeply, and learn and build relationships with also the operators in that particular market, and minimize the amount of operators that I actually work with. So aiming to like just probably work with like 1, 2, 3 operators the most, and dealing in a market that I'm very familiar with, that I take the time to get to know and understand, because it just makes it easier for you to, when you're looking at underwriting, to assess the reasonableness of the rent projections and the expense projections that they're making, because every market is going to be different. So long answer, but hopefully that gives people a lot of things to think about my journey.
Man, well, you just opened me up to a lot of different questions I got for you. So let's take it step by step. I'm still going to open up for attendees to ask you questions, but let me start right here. What was your experience with you being an LP and then also compared to being a GP?
Yeah, so as an LP, I invest, and the work I do is in the very beginning, and looking at the deal and deciding whether I want to invest in it or not. And my knowledge isn't as deep when I'm as an LP, to be honest. Whereas when I'm looking at investing in a deal from a GP hat, like a fund manager or co-GPing with people, like I feel a heavier level of responsibility to be looking at the underwriting and really understanding like what is going on, as well as understanding the market, and definitely both LP and GP the people who are executing the business plan. I think my experience to date has definitely helped me, like has caused me to weight the people who are running the deal day in, day out, the asset manager. They like getting to know who that person is, who like asking who that person is like critical to me, because like anyone can find deals and underwrite, but like, in terms of like actually asset managing it to achieve the projections, that's a whole different ball game. So yeah.
Okay. So another thing that you brought up was you raised capital. You raised $50,000
Right.
more than the host has. So and then you also put some money into your own deal. How was your experience for that first raise?
It was challenging. Um, it was definitely challenging because I didn't build out my investor base because I was just getting started. Like you don't have any investor base to build, right? You don't have any platform, and it was a 506B, so I couldn't advertise anywhere. Um, so it was challenging. The second one was also challenging too. Well, there were some others before the successful second one, but the one that I actually raised, that one was challenging as well, but it was a little bit. It was different in the sense that the investors who invested, I sent out an email, and people looked at the deal and then decided to invest, and it was very like simple, like easy. Like it wasn't like the first time, like after the first time in April of 2021, after I left my job, I want to say probably about May, June, I was on a 506C deal, which was accredited investor raise. And that was my hardest raise. That never happened, but it was my hardest raise because um, I didn't have a lot of accredited investors. And what I ended up doing is like, I ended up having to reach out and call people. So I reached out to people on my LinkedIn that were all connected to me that I knew that I used to work with, but they were not a part of my investor base, and just sort of say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Would you have any interest? Blah, 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 on and on and on. And I remember doing that like every day for like almost a week. And it just, if you can imagine, a deck of cards, playing cards, and you take them and you put them face down on a table, they're all spread out. And then what you're doing is you're lifting each to find a king or a heart or an ace or whatever. Like that's how I felt during that time when I was reaching out to different people, because it was like every person I reached out to was like another card that I was turning over, and I didn't know whether that person would be interested in investing or not. And for me, I think that's not an ideal way to raise capital. The better way to raise is building a thought leadership platform that nurtures, that attracts, nurtures people. So that way, when you're ready to raise, you send out your email, people see it, and they might have questions and whatever, but you answer their questions and they ultimately choose to invest, or they choose not to invest. But you don't end up having to spend time doing the things that I was doing at that raise.
Well, I mean, the good thing about it, you got that raise done, and that gives you instant credibility. I don't care how big or how small it was, that's instant credibility because you've done more than most. You're one percenter. I mean, you know what I'm saying? You're one percenter. I mean, let's be real about it. You're 1% about this raising that amount of money.
Yeah, it takes time. I think that the other thing for people to remember is that um, if you build a platform, eventually um, people will come. If you build it and you're consistent and you continue to keep moving forward. I think what happens to a lot of people is they might not be consistent in building their platform, and that will affect them when it comes time to raise.
You know what I'm saying? It makes a lot of sense. Okay, so before I get into the last part, you said one thing that you said a little bit earlier was, and I find you, and I've always been a big fan of you. Always find you so credible And one thing about that is your podcast.
Mhm.
I love your podcast. I love, the way you run your podcast and things like that. So what has been your biggest takeaway and biggest learning lesson from your podcast?
Hmm. That I think podcasting is powerful. Yeah. I think podcasting is powerful because it gives you a platform to reach people, um, and to create content. You're the content creator, and you have the ability, just like you creating this meetup, you have the ability to sort of um, create a platform for people that helps you to be able to reach out to other people and to collaborate with them and to create content or create opportunities for yourself and other people that would not have been otherwise there. So that's what I would say with the podcast. And I think that the podcast has the ability to be repurposed in so many different ways. I can give you an example. Last year, someone reached out to me and they were like, "We're doing a book and we'd like to feature you." And I said, "Okay." But they wanted me to pay them $10,000 to be in their book. And I go, so how does this work? Mind you, I did not do that. But I asked, how does it work? And they said to me that they have a podcast, and what they're going to do is they're going to interview me on their podcast. So the interview is going to go on the podcast, and then they're going to turn that interview into a chapter in the book that they're doing. So like it was like this book called Boss Up Series, and it was like Boss Up Series, and then whatever it is, women in real estate, Black women in real estate, or whatever they had. I can't remember what it was that they were doing. And they had like 16 women. So you do the math. 16 women, each paying like 10K each. That's like $160,000, I believe. And so they do the recording that goes onto the podcast. They take it, that recording they also use to create a chapter in the book. And then they're then promoting the book and your podcast and media blitz and whatever. And I said to myself, wow, they have taken their podcast and enabling them to charge people 10 grand to pay them. And they're going to put these people into a book and blah, blah, blah. And you can find it on Amazon. It's like legit. So that's what I mean by podcasting is powerful. It's powerful because people are able to use these platforms to like create books and courses. I took a course last year, and when I got into the course and started going through it, the course had content, but then the girl also picked up some of the episodes that she had from her podcast. She had been doing her podcast for over like 5 years. It didn't have anything to do with real estate. It's like a completely different industry. But she take this 5-year-old podcast, like episodes that she's done, and like some of these episodes she's pulled out where she's coaching and teaching other people. She pulls out some of those episodes and they get included in her course for people to like learn about whatever she was teaching and seeking to provide information on. So that's what I mean by podcasting can be really powerful because it can enable you to reach people that you would not have been able to reach otherwise. And then it also enables you to collaborate, connect with other people, and to even like if you can do some of the things that I just said, like that could even enable you to make money. Yeah. And
Hey, Vaughn.
sponsors as well, sponsors and affiliates. And it doesn't need to look like, oh, I need to pitch someone to give me money to be on my show. But one of the things that I haven't done that I need to be doing is like, for instance, if you like for instance, Invest Next, right? Invest Next is a platform for syndicators to set up their whatever on. And if you refer people to Invest Next, everybody that you refer, you get like, I don't know, 20 bucks or something. So like that could be an ad on your show. And you give them your code to get onto to set up their InvestNext account. And it even sweetens the deal when you have relationships that by them using your code, they get a discount, right? Like you're able to give people a discount or a freebie because they're using your code to get access to the service that they would need to get anyway because they're trying to build their syndication business. So it's like things like that, like, you think about as you're building your business, and that's how the podcasting can really help you a lot.
Hey, Lauren, sound like something we gotta talk about. Talk about that Tuesday.
Long time.
I know that Tuesday, Thursday meetup sound. We might gotta make a book about that.
There you go.
Lisa, I'm gonna say thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead. I guess question?
No, man. I was just saying, man. Something.
Are you just saying? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Man. I still got a couple more questions for Lisa, man.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so Lisa, first of all, I just love you telling your story. I love your honesty. I didn't know that we were gonna go that route. We talked about that, but
Yeah.
I feel like Best Ever has gotten you and gave you a adrenaline shot to you. So I think that's awesome.
I also believe in transparency. I feel that if I knew some of what I knew now, I would have approached the business maybe a little bit differently,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's quickly talk about what we talked about on the phone the other day, and that was, and something you kind of highlighted was about capital raising and about syndication. I think we see a lot of times on LinkedIn, people are doing it big and they're doing this full time and things like that. But there's a lot of us who are still working, have W-2s because we're not making enough money for whatever reason. So can you just talk about that, about like how the all the glitz and glamour is not really how it is? That only so many people who does it full time, and most people don't.
Yeah, I think that, to sort of get into your question here, what I would say is what I've learned is that co-GPing is the most lucrative, as I touched on before. That's the most lucrative way to play in the business. And being able to like not only just raise capital, but like if you're able to find the deal and like do other things, that gets you more pieces of the pie. However, like trying to do everything, you need to also recognize that like this is a team sport, and one of the ways you're able to grow faster or just grow at all is through collaborating and partnering with other people. So I think that is something that is critical to think about as well. And then I think that as people think about like if they're in their W-2 and they're thinking about like being in the syndication business, I think one thing that I have seen, not one, but one of the things that I've seen that has been a theme is regardless of whether you are going to raise capital or not, because everyone on the team should be raising some kind of money to bring to the deal, right? I think that it's beneficial to spend maybe a year courting investors. So 1 year thinking about who it is that you want to raise money from, thinking about what their questions are, thinking what about their concerns are, thinking about what their issues are, and beyond thinking, having conversations with them and sort of saying, hey, I'm thinking about moving into commercial real estate. Have you ever thought about investing in these types of projects before? And sort of exploring what it is that they're interested in, what they like to do, like what kind of returns they would like to see. And then what that enables you to do is like, now you have that one-on-one conversation with all these different people. The people who have invested in my deals are people who I have actually spoken to. Yes, there are people like Hunter Thompson and company and Good Egg who get to a level where people, they don't need to have conversations with people anymore. Those people just wire 100,000, $500,000 checks to them. They don't have to have those conversations anymore because they've already built a platform that is out there that enables investors to get to know them on their time. on the investor's own time, because they can go to YouTube and see their YouTube channel and consume their content, read their ebooks, listen to their podcasts, and all that kind of stuff, and they get comfortable and make the decision to invest. And when you're starting, you don't have all of that. You don't have YouTube for people that they can go find you, and lead magnets, all these ebooks that you've created already. Like, that stuff doesn't yet exist. So how you can get yourself ready is by having conversations with people in your circle. And if they don't know other people, then having conversation, like asking them for referrals, or getting on LinkedIn, and like going to conferences like this, and like meeting people and building relationships and telling people what it is that you're trying to do, and like setting up a CRM, putting these people's information into your CRM, like all that stuff is things that you can do before you even launch your full-on platform. And the reality is, some of those early investors are going to be those people that you have those one-on-one conversations with, who've gotten comfortable with you as a person and your integrity and your trust. Because ultimately, when they send that wire, they're sending it not because they think that they're sending it because they trust you. The trust has been transferred from you to them, and that's why they send it. So that, to me, what later happens is that trust becomes a heavy weight on your back that makes you think deeply about the deals that you decide to put in front of people. Because now people begin to write checks because they believe in you. And they no longer are looking deeply at the deal. They're looking at, okay, I trust Lisa. So now Lisa has to make sure that she's doing all of her work, underwriting the deal, checking out the market, making sure that these are the right partners, to make sure that she is not guiding them into a landmine, guiding their money into a place where it's not going to come back.
Great answer. All right, one last question for me before I open up to the attendees. What so far is your best highlight from the best ever conference we have right now? I know what it is, but can you
Yes.
let everybody know?
I would say, thinking back, we just started today,
Right.
just like at 2:00.
Right.
So not super long. But one of the things that come to mind for me is Jeremy Roll. I caught his presentation this afternoon, and he was saying that how he asked how many people, as syndicators and passive investors, so investors, both active and passive, how many of you are, how many of you are taking into consideration that if we are in a high inflationary environment right now, and you're buying an asset right now in this environment that's high inflationary, so you have high prices, high rents, that the NOI for your property 12 months from now might actually be lower when you have less inflation. I'll admit that I never really thought about that. And so, yeah, and then to close the loop on that, because you're probably thinking, well, how do you then sort of get comfortable? I think some of the things that he talked about was like looking for, like, buying properties that have equity in it. So like essentially finding properties that are undervalued, right? So that way you have instant equity walking in, so to help protect yourself. What else? Oh, he also went on to talk about, like, he's also invested in other asset classes that he doesn't need to have it depreciate. He doesn't need for it to appreciate in value. So like ATMs, for instance, when you invest in ATM machines, which is an accredited investor play only, you are anticipating that asset class is actually going to depreciate in value. So you're never going to get that. So you get your money back through the cash flow that the ATMs kick off every single month. But like, there's no like sale to happen at the end. It's just, it's a machine, so it decreases in value. So that's that.
Right.
But yeah, so those are some of the things that I like. That speech specifically really helped me, like stood out to me. I think the last thing that I would say was the deferred tax trust. There was a slight presentation on that as well. And that sort of further highlighted to me, like, you need to be, like, if you're working with an investor that's selling a property and they are going to be getting proceeds greater than $1 million, like, that's where the deferred sales trust actually comes in really handy and can enable you to help them. And that deferred sales trust can be very beneficial for people who are crypto investors. So all those crypto investors that are out there that have made tons of money and want to allocate some of that into real estate, they can use the deferred sales trust to the extent that they're allocating more than $1 million in their crypto proceeds into your like real estate deal. And that helps them to shelter their tax impact as opposed to having to pay taxes on the crypto gains.
Wow. Okay. I thought you were going to say the women's breakfast.
Well, the women's breakfast was good too. And the networking was good as well. But on a technical, I just felt the energy that your people wanted some technical,
Okay.
some meat and not just vegetables.
Okay. All right, Mr. International, ask your question, please, sir. Sorry about that before.
You asked the question already.
Awesome. That's
You
easy.
asked the question already. The question I want to ask was like, because you said, you were honest enough. First of all, Lisa, I want to say thank you for an awesome presentation. That's number one. Number two, I like the part that you said that you had to work, right? Because a lot of people, but we talk about this a lot. People don't talk about this enough. All you hear about sometimes is quitting your job. You should quit. But how are you gonna pay your bills? And I want to, my hats off to you for being honest and upfront. Because truthfully, you got to say that. You could have said, you could kept on going about your business, and that's it. And I appreciate that very much. Yeah, Aaron, I was going to ask the question. That's when Aaron told me to shut up. So he asked the question already. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Aaron.
You're welcome. I see my job as my largest investor in my business. And my job is also my largest investor in myself, because I've strategically chosen to take roles that can help me grow, both in real estate, because the startup is in real estate still. So I'm still staying in the industry. So being able to grow professionally in my career and accounting and funds, and it's also funds. So funds, real estate, more on the professional side, and institutional capital and all that good stuff, while also continuing to build my business. So, it's definitely my jobs have been my largest investor today. That's how I get money to invest in deals to be able to become financially free to begin with. So yeah.
Anybody else? Robert Aragona, Desmond, Cinto? Rhonda?
Okay. I'm gonna ask another question then. If anybody wants to ask this question. So when you present deals to people, right? Yeah. How long do you do it? Is it about being sweet to the point? Is this something like a presentation? What is your sweet spot for presenting a deal to somebody?
I think the sweet spot, when I think about the shore view, 30 to 40 minutes.
Okay.
30 to 40 minutes. I start off with welcoming everyone and outlining why I like this deal. So people know why I'm investing and why I like the deal. And that's the other thing. I invest in the deals that I bring investors into. And then my co-GPs that are also on the deal, they'll come in, they might talk about the market, they'll go through the asset, and then we'll then wrap up. I'll go through how people can invest. And then we wrap up and that's it. And then we'll field questions. So then we give people an opportunity to ask us any questions about the deal. And then that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Lisa, how are you? Nice
I'm doing pretty good.
meet you. Nice to meet you. I've been listening in and appreciate you sharing everything. So you talk about it seems like your communication with presenting your syndication and all the aspects of it. I got involved basically on my first one, so I'm kind of learning because there's so much opportunity out there. You know, people wanting you to invest this, and this. So
Right.
learn. With your communication, I like how you go over everything and share. Do you offer only 506Cs for accredited, or you'll do the non-accredited also?
Yeah, so my last deal was a 506B, and the deal that I had done in 2019 was also a B as well. So I've done Bs, and I will still do Bs, but I do Bs and Cs. So I do
Okay.
both. Yeah.
And your minimum for the Cs are usually I see 50,000.
Correct.
You go
Yeah.
below that, or is that required by the SEC?
Right now it's just been 50K. So that's sort of where I've sort of kept it. One of the things that I've been exploring is for my sophisticated investors, like close friends and family, is doing like tribes on TribeVest. So creating a tribe on a platform called tribevest.com, where people who are sophisticated investors and want to come into 506B, and I have a relationship with them, you know, they and I know each other. We create a tribe together with other sophisticated investors and pool the capital to invest in a deal. And the reason I've been thinking about doing that, I haven't done it yet, but the reason why I'm thinking about doing that is because it's less cost prohibitive as doing a full-on syndication for 506B. And when you're doing one for accredited investors, you typically will do a higher minimum. So sometimes it'll be 50K, but some people will even push it to like $100,000 minimum. Because let's face it, if you get 5 investors or 10 investors at 100K each, that's $500,000 to $1 million. And you're only dealing with 10 investors. Whereas if you are doing 25,000 or 50K, like that, you just doubled your investor count to get to the same dollar, like total raise amount. So that's something that I think about. So yeah, so that's sort of where I'm at on that. And TribeVest is something that anyone can think about doing. Like if you have friends and family that you know, and say everyone wants to only put in like 10K or 5K, that's how you could potentially like pool money together and invest. Like it's almost like you're creating your own family office or friends family, like a friend family office kind of thing. But you definitely want to do it with people that you know, like, and trust. Like you really like people that you know, kind of thing.
Okay. I have one more question for you.
Sure.
So from what I'm hearing in the syndication type deals, they're talking about after, you know, you're getting your quarterly dividends and then when it's time to refi or, you know, they sell, you get the majority of your capital back. I've heard someone saying even after that point, on certain situations, you can still get a quarterly dividend. What is that about?
The only thing I could think of is a refinance. So that's where they buy the property, they're holding onto it. Typically, that would only happen with a value add. So like you buy a Class C, you know that you have a ton of value add to do, right? So you buy it, you execute on the value add. Maybe it's like changing demographics, so kicking out the tenants that are in, renovating the place, and then bringing in a higher tenant profile than the one that was in there before. So in maybe a year, you're now doubled or tripled your income on the place because of all the work that you've done. And then you go back to the bank, you refinance, and you're able to, because now the property is valued higher because now you have higher NOI, net operating income. So now you get, you can take some of that money out, and that's where you'll take that money out and maybe return capital to your investors, and then continue to still hold the property. And then that now could be an infinite return, because like if you're able to give investors back all their money and they're still getting distributions after that, now it's infinite, because they have the money and now they can go invest in something else, but they're still invested in this deal until you ultimately sell the deal. And then potentially they would now get all of what they would be getting would be realized gains on the investment. So that's the only thing that I could think of where people are getting their capital back and then continuing to get distributions thereafter.
Do you offer those type of opportunities?
So that's a great question. So here's what I would say to that is that anyone you meet that is underwriting a refinance in their underwriting, you need to ask the following questions. If you're unable to refi, will this deal still work? Because refinances are not guaranteed. So that's the answer to your question, is that if I find a deal that has the ability to do refi, but works without the refi being done, and we buy it, and then a year or so later, we're able to execute on the refi and give people their money back, great. But if we're unable to do the refi, the deal needs to still be able to cash flow and perform well. Otherwise, I wouldn't invest in that deal.
Thanks a lot for your answers and your knowledge here in the field.
Yeah, no worries. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, because like I was saying, there's so much opportunities. People want you to invest their deal, so much out there that I'm new to syndication investing. I came in as an LP, but I'm not accredited, so that was a good opportunity. And now with the stock market is going crazy down, I like to shift more money into real estate. So
yeah,
that's my take on it. Try to
what I would say to you is, and I would say to any passive investor, is that the more you get yourself educated about the business is the better. And one of the ways you can get educated about the business is trying to meet as many sponsors as possible and seeing as many deals as possible. And looking at how the deals are structured, asking for the PPM, which they'll send it to you. And looking at the fees. What are the fees? And so maybe for you, something that you could consider doing if you're interested in investing in these kinds of deals is like creating an Excel sheet, and you have a column for all the different sponsors. And then underneath you have like rows, and the first row is like, what are their fees? So that means you need to go pull the PPM. Yes, have a good one, Cinto. You get the PPM and look in the PPM, read it and see where the fees are. How much are they charging for acquisition, refi fee, disposition fee? Pull all the fees. And then look at their structure. Like, is it an 80-20? Is there a preferred return? What's the average cash on cash for this deal? So maybe spend like maybe 2 months, just 2 or 3 months. It just depends on your situation, but 2 or 3 months getting like going to these kind of meetups, meeting sponsors, talking, asking, hey, do you know any sponsors in the multifamily space, in blah, blah, blah. And people will tell you, hey, I know this person, that person, whatever. And then you fill that out, because what that's going to do is that's going to make you a more powerful investor, because you will start seeing, oh, look at the fees on this one. Look at the split here. Like, how will you know that you're getting a good deal when you haven't even seen what's available? So you got to spend the time. So that's what I do as a fund manager, is I am out here meeting. That's why I come to Best Ever. I come to Best Ever to meet tons of operators and to build relationships. But as I said earlier, I only want to work with 1 to 3. And I want to work with people that I know, like, and trust, but I also am looking at the numbers. So how do they structure their deal? Is there a preferred return? No preferred return. You know, sometimes not having a preferred return is not a deal breaker. You know, like if you're dealing with a class C asset that's heavy duty value add, having a preferred return doesn't make sense because they're going to have to do a lot of work on that asset for the next 6 months to 1 year. So the preferred return is just not reasonable.
What's
But
that
like,
mean again? Sorry.
so preferred,
Yeah.
so preferred return is what is like where they'll say the first, like maybe the first X% of investors' money needs to be given to them in a form of distribution before GP gets to share in the money that has come off the property.
Yeah, my deal that I'm in has that. So I think that's a good thing.
Yes, that is a good thing. But that's a good thing, especially for class A and B deals. But if they're doing a class C deal, like, it's nice to know that they have that. But if they don't have that, it's also not the end of the world, especially if they're going to be doing a heavy duty value add. Because the reality is the only way they're going to probably pay that is by over raising from investors. So that way they can pay the preferred return because the property's not going to necessarily be able to perform to pay it.
Okay. Very
So
good.
these are some of the things to think about. And as I said, the way you can become a very powerful investor is like doing your own research and doing some of that stuff that I talked about. Like, you know, you just create a spreadsheet, you have all the different operators, and like you put out like, what are the fees that they're charging? How do they structure their deals? Is there a pref return, no pref return? What's their class? What asset classes do they play in? B, C, A, whatever. Development deals versus opportunistic. What markets are they in? You know, I think those are the key things. And then, like, what's the business plan? And then this then enables you to sort of look across different deals, and you start to see, oh wow, like this deal is a class A minus or B plus, and they're giving a preferred return of 8%. Some of it is being paid during the whole period, and some of it is being paid at the back end. But the IRR on this deal is like, you know, projected to be, they're going for like maybe 16, 17, 18%. And then say you are presented a class C deal, and the class C deal has the same return profile as the class A. Like for me, I'm probably going to go with the class A, especially if I believe that the operator can perform, because the A has quote unquote less risk than the C, and the C, they have to execute the value add in order to achieve those returns.
Okay.
But
Very good idea.
there's just a lot of things to like just take a step back and sort of think about, and that helps you to just be educated as an investor.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Yeah, no
very
worries.
great presentation. Two questions I had, Aaron, for Lisa. With the example you just was talking about, you and Robert, when there is execution, 8% return, preferred return, maybe for 3 years, and maybe it's a refinance of 2 to 3 multiples, is it good to have it in writing already that once the money is returned, the investment's returned, that the continuing holding of the property, the split is reduced, or the preferred return is reduced?
That's a good question. So let me just make sure I get clear on this. The crux of your question is that you would, if there is, you would want to make sure that the agreement has in it that in the event that the property experiences a refi, return of capital, what is going to happen to distributions after people refi and get 100% of their money back? Yes, you want to see that kind of information detailed in the PPM. And if it's not, you want to ask about it to say, hey, listen, if you guys were to refi and give us 100%, give us our money back, will we continue to be in the property? You cannot assume that you will be in the property because some people will refi you and send you on your way.
And
Well,
as
what
a
if-
fund manager, I'm considering hiring someone or looking into different companies because I want to find out, is it better to have the funds available or to raise capital first?
So have the funds available in your fund or just to know that you have investors that are interested in investing? Which one?
In your capital first, your funds first, in your company first.
So the way I interpreted that question is that you would want to create a fund and take the money from investors and put it into your fund and then go look for deals. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, so I would advise against doing that, but that's just my suggestion. And the reason I would advise against doing that is because really and truly, the moment you take capital from someone, the preferred return should start ticking. And what ends up happening is when you take capital and the preferred return starts ticking and you don't yet have a deal to invest that money in, you essentially are behind the 8 ball out the gate. So
No,
that's
Lisa.
not a good
So
place
just
to
to
be.
have them on standby, huh?
No, Lisa, you didn't go into the part of how much it's going to cost to create the fund first.
About 15, 20.
But you can create the fund. You can create a fund and just don't put any money in it. So don't take money from them.
Yeah,
Like
but
even
that's like $8,000 out at a minimum. So you already have the sunk cost before you're even ready to take on investors. I would just say, why would you want to go into that type of expense if you can find a deal, start raising the capital and invest on that deal? I think the reason why people are saying let's create a fund is because when people have money to invest, you want to take that money and then have some time to go and find a deal. But like Lisa is saying, once you receive their money, you should be paying the preferred return.
correct. So the reason why some people will create a fund, like what you're suggesting though, Desmond, is that when you're getting started, it can actually help you. So if you have the ability to have a longer time to raise, that has ability to help you. Whereas when you just have a deal right now, like you need to get the money right now, right? And the fund, in my opinion, works if you do a blind fund. Yeah, I know you don't have any track record. I get it. I know. But blind fund, clear on what it is that you're investing in. And it's only for accredited investors. Because if you do a 506B, like you would need to have a relationship before you had created your entity, and that's just problematic. Whereas if you have a C and you're out there building, when you get, like I have calls with investors all the time, they're like, do you have anything that you're working on right now? And it's like, well, no, I don't have anything right this minute. But once I have something, like I'll bring to you. This is where some people will sort of waitlist them into their fund, but they don't take the money from them. And then and the other reason why some people will do the fund is because if they co-GP with people, sometimes they, like, depending on who you're doing it with, you may have just given your investors to these people. So that's one of the ways people are able to protect their base. I don't know if you know Hunter Thompson. But the way he raised his, so his first raise was like 700,000, and he raised it over a course of 1 year. 1 year. Mhm.
But when did
1
it go
year.
into effect? When the
Hey,
investments
hold
went
on,
out?
hold on, Desmond, real quick. Lisa, are you good with time?
I do need to wrap up, but yeah, he raised it over a course of 1 year. So what he did is he had an arrangement with an operator. I don't know the exact arrangement, but like essentially, well, actually, I've seen this being around other capital raisers, is that you say to them, hey, I'm going to try and bring 700 to your deal. And you tell them, hey, like, I don't have the ability, I might not make it, but I'm going to keep raising. And then what ends up happening is they close on the deal, but you keep raising. And as you bring in the money, they're able to take their money out. And the money that you raised now goes in until you get to your target. But you have to negotiate that. You have to get into relationships with people to be able to unlock those kinds of opportunities for yourself. You know, they're just not hanging around everywhere, but like they're out there, like, you know, you just have to network and build those relationships. So those are some of the reasons why people will do this fund path. And later on, like in the beginning, the fund is not the most lucrative, co-GPing is. But I think that as you have the ability to raise more and more money, the fund has, as a standalone entity, you have the ability, the fund model can become very lucrative for people who are able to raise even more, because like you have the ability to maybe work with more than one operator and then charge a fee at your level because, hey, you're doing work, doing due diligence on these people, and then ultimately picking the deal, especially if you're doing a blind fund, because people are relying on you to make the decision onto what deal you're going to put into your fund. And I just spoke to Vina Jetty. So she's Vibe Funds. She and Ellie Perlman have a $100 million multifamily fund. And I was asking her here at the Best Ever, you know, like if I was to invest 100K in your fund today, like how would it work? And she said, first of all, you can't invest today in my fund. What ends up happening is once I find the next deal for the fund, then you have an opportunity, we'll tell investors, hey, you have an opportunity to invest either directly into the deal or into the fund that already has 3 deals. I think they have 3 deals in that fund already now. And essentially say she finds, we're February, right? Say in May, she finds a deal for her fund. Then I put 100K in because I now want to be in her fund, which now is closing on another deal. I would put my 100K in and her fund would get rebalanced then. So from then forward, I would be a part of all of the distributions and stuff that come off of the fund. So that's how she's doing it. And she has an active fund that is not taking money right this minute, but will take money when they find their next deal.
Right.
So a lot of different options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen her speak at an event.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, and Josh Childress, he's having a $500 million
Wow.
fund that he's doing.
Okay.
So yeah, so he's yeah, absolutely.
Big money time.
Yeah, you know.
But
what I'm
I
saying?
think that wraps me up, then, Aaron.
Well,
Unless people
absolutely.
have any
Actually,
other
I just want to tell
questions.
you real quick how big time you are. That Lee
not
Johnson
big
actually
time.
came on camera. This is like one of the first times Lee
Yeah,
Johnson
I
came
know
on
Lisa,
camera.
man. I came because I know Lisa. She's a social media maven at this point. And I said to myself, Lisa took time out of Best Ever to do Aaron's meetup. Wow.
Because Aaron's my friend, man. So I gotta stay committed.
Yeah, but I'm saying Lee Johnson is on camera, so this is a big time event right here for Lisa. But thank you so much for coming in your packed schedule you have in a conference, things like that. I just want to say that again. And before I end, I'm gonna say this what I say last week, and also remember next week, Mark Season will be my co-host, and we're gonna talk about why syndication, why not people do syndication. Please spread the word. I want to have a big panel with people just talking about this because I wonder why no more people do syndication. All right, so I'm gonna end this with this. As you guys know, I'm trying to go to Old Capitals basketball tournament March 25th. If you guys know anybody who is not a weekend warrior, please let them contact me. That's all I'm gonna say on camera. All right, Lisa, thank you so much. Thank you guys. God bless you.
All right, thanks.